Good evening, everyone. I am Tiffany Taylor Lee, the president of the Bay Area Houston Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Thank you in advance for joining us for tonight's important webinar, Legislation, Litigation, and the Legacy of Our Vote. Since our inception in 2005, Baja has been anchored in the greater Southeast Houston area, proudly serving the communities of Clear Lake, Friendswood, Pasadena, Pearland, Seabrook, and Webster. Through our commitment to service and our sorority's 5-point programmatic thrust, we strive to provide innovative community based initiatives that uplift and empower those we serve. As a nonpartisan organization, we are honored to gather with you this evening to engage in a timely and critical conversation about the past, present, and future of voting rights. The right to vote is the cornerstone of our democracy and a legacy hard won through sacrifice, advocacy, and a collective action. Tonight's discussion will help us better understand legislation and litigation, continue to shape the legacy, and our responsibility to protect it. We encourage you to listen, reflect, and actively engage as we explore how our voices, our votes, and our vigilance remain essential in advancing equity and justice in our communities. Welcome, and thank you again for being with us tonight.
Plachette, I think you're up.
All righty. Good evening and welcome. Thank you all for joining today's important discussion on legislation, litigation, and legacy of our vote. I am Dr. Plachette Johnson Wiggins, president of the Gulf Coast, Texas chapter of the Links Incorporated. Tonight's conversation invites us to think critically about our laws, our court system, and how our collective actions shape our future. It is an opportunity to learn, to listen, and to honor the enduring impact of civic participation across generations. We are gracious and thankful to be able to partner with our Baja chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and we look forward to this evening's discussion. Again, welcome, and thank you in advance for being part of this discussion and for contributing your voice to this important legacy. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome again. I'll be the third person to welcome you. Before we do get started, though, I'd like to take this moment to give a moment of silence, I should say, for Reverend Jesse Jackson. So if you would just give us a few seconds. Thank you. Good evening again. My name is April Powell Martin, and I am a proud member of Bay Area Houston Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and the Gulf Coast Apollo, Texas chapter of the Links Incorporated, where I serve as Legislative Affairs Chair. First and foremost, again, we want to thank you. You could have chosen to spend your evening anywhere, and yet you chose to be here with us tonight. And that speaks volumes. We are excited that we already have 63 participants who have chosen to be with us tonight. At some point, we may ask you to let us know from what cities you're calling because we love to see the reach of our community. I'd also like to take this moment to recognize the outstanding leadership of our two organizations. Again, President Tiffany Taylor Lee of Bay Area Houston Alumni Chapter and President Plachette Johnson Wiggins of Gulf Coast Apollo, Texas chapter of the Links Incorporated. And we'll also have Houston Voting Initiative representative on as well. Of course, this event would not be possible without the dedication of our hardworking committees, chaired by Makia Thomas, Janice Benton, and Mary Benton. We appreciate your commitment and countless hours of preparation. Now, tonight is about informing ourselves so we can effectively inform others. The state of our nation calls for engaged, educated, and activated individuals. We can't afford to sit on the sidelines. We can't afford to wait. The policies shaping our lives demand our attention and our action. And I'd say that we're right on time today because it is actually the first day of early voting here in Texas. So we hope that you leave this evening not only better informed, but empowered to have the conversations necessary to learn to share what you've learned and to help mobilize those who may feel discouraged or disconnected. If you know someone who has expressed frustration about how policies are impacting their life, invite them to this space. And matter of fact, if it's not too late, send them the link now. I do want to remind everyone again, my president did mention this, but just a reminder that all participating organizations and content herein is nonpartisan. We focus on policy. Last shout out of the evening, but it is a special shout out to our young people who have engaged tonight. You are not just the future. And I'm talking about that very important voting block, 18 through 29. You're not just the future, you're the present. The decisions made today will shape the world that you inherit. And so your voice does, in fact, matter. You'll soon hear from our dynamic leader who plays an important role in shaping the policies that affect us all. But first, we want this to be interactive. We're not going to do a whole bunch of talking right now, but we want you to interact. So we're going to launch a poll. Matter of fact, thank you, Angela and Tarana, because one of our goals tonight is to better understand voter behaviors and perspectives on why voting is or is not important, or your thoughts about voting. So we're going to launch the poll, and we invite you to select the answer that closely aligns with what you feel about voting, and then we'll take a look at the results. While we're getting that poll ready, I just want to remind everyone again that early voting begins today in Texas. It ends February 27th, and election day is actually March 3rd. So we've got a lot on the ballot. There are several websites that have sample ballots that you can go to. One in particular is votetexas.org. You just put in your zip code, and up pops your ballot. Do want to let you know that I have worked for election protection in the past. And so there's a lot of confusion, but you can actually bring in papers or printouts to help you select your candidates or your propositions of choice. All right, there we go. Little filibuster there. Category number 1, please describe your voting identity. You see the choices there. And the second question, how much do current economic policies reflect your household's needs? So we'll give you a little time to select. And I think we have 5 questions. So we'll have another screen of questions. All right. Everybody answer those. Let's go to the next set of questions. Or is that it? If we don't have the other set queued up and ready to present, then perhaps we can publish the results of just these 2 questions. That's a question for the strike team.
Hi, Sora. There's still folks answering all 5 questions, so I'll give them just another minute or two before I publish the results.
Okay, thank you. And I
No problem.
apologize. I did not scroll down. So
It's okay.
if anyone else made that mistake, there are 5 questions on the screen. Sorry. Ooh, when you skip an election, what is the primary reason? What level of government has the greatest return on investment for your daily life? And which of these factors is the primary engine that drives you to the polls? Can't wait to see what we've collected here with our 69 people. All right, the results are in. So, as you can see here, we've got a lot of reliable voters that say they never miss an election. I was hoping and predicting that that would probably be the answer, given that you all are very engaged. That's why you're on the call this evening. But I do want to bring your attention to the 6% that say, I rarely find a reason to show up. That is alarming, and we need to be able to speak to those individuals as well to make them feel again engaged and connected. So thank you all, number one, for being honest in that. We will talk a little bit more in the end about being a skeptical voter and making sure that we address the reasons why. Let's go on to number two. That means I can scroll down here. Whoa, okay. How much do current economic policies reflect your household's needs? All right. So this is pretty even split between high and moderate and really low. So pretty much you could say that the economy is top of mind for those who are voters and those who are on the webinar tonight. So we got the economy. All right. When you skip an election, what's the primary reason? All right, so just in 2022, the primaries, the Texas primaries for 2022 recorded only 45% of registered voters that actually voted the last time we had primaries. So I'm wondering if saving my time for more productive things or sending a message to protest um, or has zero impact on the final outcome. What are your thoughts on that? So interesting that we have almost a third saying that there's more than a third saying they're saving their time for more productive things. I'd be interested to know what's more productive. Maybe we'll get into that. Fourth question, which level of government has the greatest return on investment for your daily life? This was a pretty evenly split. I guess you could vote more than once. The math ain't mathing, but looks like president, Congress, Texas, and national laws, 50%. The state. So people seem to understand and realize now that voting and elections are local. So when we talk about the governor and the state and civil rights, state taxes, that's all very local. Then again, 50% mayor, local property values and police, and then judicial is 28%. All right. Which of these factors is the primary engine that drives you to the polls? All right. We have a good, pretty even split here, but I want to go down to the last one where it says the issue factor to advocate for a specific urgent cause, such as reproductive rights, judicial appointments, or economic stability. So if I'm guessing and putting together a theme here, I would say that the economy is probably, again, top of mind for a lot of our listeners this evening. So very important there. But we'll get into that a little bit later. But I don't want to belabor this, and I want to bring on our speakers. So, without further ado, it's my distinct honor to introduce our expert speaker for the evening. Demetria L. McCain is the current director of policy for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, where she assumed this role in July 2024. Demetria leads the organization's policy team and its diverse policy advocacy portfolio, including working with senior leadership to set the strategic direction for the organization's legislative policy and advocacy work in criminal justice, economic justice, education, and political participation. That means why you are here today. Demetria previously worked with the Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, we know that as HUD, as the appointed Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary from September 2021 to June 2024. And of course, we know that was under Secretary Marcia Fudge. Her primary focus in this role was to eliminate housing discrimination and promote economic opportunities. Other impressive service includes her role as president of the Inclusive Communities Project, a Dallas, Texas-based affordable fair housing nonprofit. She also served as a staff attorney for the National Housing Law Project, as an Equal Justice Fellow, and at the Neighborhood Legal Services Program of Washington, D.C. She is a graduate of New York University, Brooklyn College, and Howard University School of Law, and a member of the Dallas alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. So she is a Texan, y'all. Dimitri brings a wealth of experience and deep understanding to the role as an esteemed practitioner of public policy. Her demonstrated record and expertise in efforts of racial justice, ranging from economic justice to fair housing to support of low income and diverse communities, serves as an asset to the Legal Defense Fund and the work the organization does nationwide. Everyone, please welcome Demetria McCain.
Well, thank you, indeed, indeed. And I will be early voting this weekend, just to let people know in Dallas, Texas. But I will say, Houston area folks, that my mother was from Houston. My late mother was from Houston. She attended Phyllis Wheatley High School. So I have some connection, and I still have relatives in the Houston area. But it's great to be with you. I am currently in Oxford, Mississippi, folks, where today was day one of a trial regarding DeSoto County, Mississippi, as it relates to redistricting on the county level. And so we'll talk a little bit more about redistricting, but I believe I have some slides. If folks could pull up some slides to share as we go along in this conversation, I'm very much appreciated. And let me just say thank you for having me. As was mentioned, I am a Delta, but I'm also the daughter of a Link as well. And so it's just great to be here with my fellow Texans. I always love talking to Texans. You know, we've been through a lot when it comes to voting rights in these last, let's say, 9 months or so. Um, all right. So let's see. Let's see. The slides look a little bit different than original, but that's fine. That's great. So let's dig on in. Let's see what you have next on the next slide. Okay, so let's start here. All right, so I just want to level set, and I don't want to assume that people know some of this background. So I'm going to mention a little bit of background. And so when we think about voting rights, we got to go back to the 1800s, right? In the 1800s, during Reconstruction, the 15th Amendment set out the right to vote by people who were formerly enslaved, more specifically, men who were formerly enslaved. And so the language here on the screen is straight from the 15th Amendment. Now, we all know that that actual constitutional amendment was really honored in the breach, meaning nobody followed it, which is why we have, for instance, Selma and Bloody Sunday. Matter of fact, we will be in Selma. They have a convening every year around the anniversary of Bloody Sunday. LDF will be in Selma. Others will be in Selma just next month. So we're just a few weeks away from the 61st anniversary of Bloody Sunday, which we all know created and led forth, I would say, all the work people were doing to get us to the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And so that was huge. It contained, Voting Rights Act of 1965 contained a couple of major sections that were especially important when we talk about protecting the Black political voting power. And that was Section 5 and Section 2. Now, Section 5 was the pre-clearance section of the Voting Rights Act. And that pre-clearance section said, anytime any official at the county level, state level, federal level, if they were going to change something, I should say local and state, if they were going to change anything, even like a location of voting, they would need to get permission from the Department of Justice. Well, fast forward to 2013, we had Shelby County versus Holder, and that pretty much annihilated Section 5. So the idea that a change could happen, like your polling place or a dates, those kind of things, nobody's looking at it again at the federal level. And honestly, right now, I don't think we want DOJ to look at it anyway. But that is critical, and that's really hampered our ability to enforce our voting rights. And then there was a case, I won't get into the details, it was an Arizona case in 2021 that kind of made it more difficult under Section 2. Now, Section 2 speaks directly to the issue of when we believe that race actually has been used in a discriminatory fashion when it comes to voting rights. And that is something that right now we're closely waiting for the Supreme Court to make a decision about a case I'll talk about in just a second. So In 2023, if we go over to Allen versus Milligan, that was a case just 2023, you guys, was just not that long ago, where the Supreme Court did make a decision regarding Section 2 and made sure that Section 2 was recognized, and it actually created a second opportunity district for Black voters in Alabama. Okay, so Section 2 has been utilized, and that's another reason I'm here right now in Mississippi, is under Section 2, which is the vehicle to challenge discrimination when it comes to voting. And so the Supreme Court spoke in Allen versus Milligan. But then fast forward to the case that's pending right now at the Supreme Court, Calais. This is a Louisiana case. Very odd situation here to the extent that the state of Louisiana created a map, right? But then folks came forth, the plaintiffs in this new case in Louisiana called themselves non-African Americans, right? And so they challenged the state's map. Now, that map that was created by the state after some previous litigation created an extra district for Black voters to be able to elect someone. And so that's right now, there are two Black congressional representatives representing the state of Louisiana. Representative Fields' district was created out of the original Louisiana case. But here we are with this Calais case, right? And so just to let you know how intense this topic is, we LDF argued the case back in March, okay? Fast forward, the Supreme Court usually rules on all their cases by the end of June. Instead of ruling on the case, they said, hey, we want you to come back and re-argue this case. And so our president, Janae Nelson, went in October and argued the case in front of the Supreme Court. So that was the second time LDF argued this very case. Now, mind you, that happens very rarely. I believe there was a second re-argument during the Brown versus Board of Ed case to show you how high the stakes are, right? And so right now the stakes are whether or not Section 2 will still be recognized as part of the Voting Rights Act, or will it be struck down? This does not just involve Louisiana, folks. This issue would reverberate around the entire country. So all eyes are on the Calais case. Next slide, please. Great. A little more table setting, let's say. So this is what we're up against right now. This is critical. So back in January 2025, an entire year ago, excuse me, we had a bill called the SAVE Act in Congress. The SAVE Act was going to require documentary proof of citizenship in order to register to vote, okay? It passed the House, right? And we know who has the majority in the House. LDF, my organization, totally nonpartisan, but I'm just stating facts here. So it did pass the House, but it did not pass the Senate. So we were saved from SAVE, you might say. And then just a couple of months later, while it was still pending in Congress, the president issued an executive order, which pretty much matched almost identically to the actual bill that was introduced in January 2025. So if you see this, you see how there are all these forces acting at the same time. Now, what I don't have on the screen that I will tell you all, since you're from Texas, there was also a Texas version of the SAVE Act during the 2025 legislative session. But fortunately, we had folks, we had Deltas, we had Black legislators in the state house, and others who were able to fight off the Texas version of the SAVE Act. So we would have had to deal with this documentary proof of citizenship in Texas before the rest of the country had that state bill passed. But like I said, fortunately, there were folks in the state legislature in Austin who were able to fight that off. All right, so we got the SAVE Act, and then we have the executive order. So our organization and a few others filed suit against this executive order. We were like, an executive order cannot change a statutory provision that Congress passed. So we prevailed in that litigation. And so this documentary proof of citizenship issue went away as it relates to the executive order. All right. So here we are this past January, just last month. As you know, I just said the SAVE Act did not pass on the Senate side. So guess what? Folks have brought back another act, another bill, I should say, the Save America Act, this past January, which does the same thing that the previous Save Act does, but it's even more precise as telling states what to do. Now, be even more careful. There is also the MEGA Act. The MEGA Act also is about documentary proof of citizenship, but it's even more intense and more expansive because it really kind of does a lot of things. It creates actually a new list management structure. Now, if you're in Texas, you may know that all of our information, our governor sent all of our private information from the voting rolls up to Washington, D.C. Other states in the country are fighting this. There's actual lawsuits because other states are saying, no, we're not going to give it to you because of privacy concerns. But we live in Texas, and so our information is already there. And so with the MEGA Act, they're trying to mandate that our information gets sent to the federal government that's collected when we are registering to vote. But there are lots more bells and whistles to the MEGA Act that I can't go into detail right now given our time. But those are the bill numbers. If you want to write them down, you can look them up. Just go to congress.gov and you can see more details. All right, so that's the table setting. That's the background. If we can go to the next slide, please. Priorities that we have at LDF and others in the civil rights community, as well as even others outside of that, is the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Many of us know that John R. Lewis was right there on the Edmund Pettus Bridge during Bloody Sunday. He was a legislator for a good amount of time in Congress. So that's why it's named after him. And so the idea here is to bring back some of those things we've lost through litigation for the Voting Rights Act, right? Because I told you we lost Section 5, right? And it also would strengthen some of the things that we have that we need going forward so that we're not as vulnerable, you might say. And so that's been introduced for a while now, but it's been reintroduced by Representative Sewell from Alabama just this past March. Pretty much along party lines, she had co-sponsors of that bill. And so that bill is sitting in the Judiciary Committee. So for folks don't know the procedure, a bill is introduced, it can either die or it can get sent to a committee. It could die in committee, but the committee can take it up and have a hearing, or they cannot have a hearing. So right now it's in committee, it's in the Judiciary Committee. And so that's where things stand regarding this. But just to give you an example of how important upcoming elections are, it's going to sit there and probably die in the Judiciary Committee if there's not a change in who is in power in Congress, right? So we're not able to strengthen this at the federal level until they have the folks who are civil rights minded in Congress to vote for this. All right, next slide, please. So what we get to now are state voting rights acts. So we have been very much engaged at LDF with state level voting rights acts. On the screen, you'll see where they exist already. Now, while we wait for the John R. L. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, we were like, let's not wait. Let states protect themselves, okay? And so that doesn't mean that we've given up on the John R. L. Lewis. It's just that folks in states want to protect themselves and their voters, right? And so there's several that have been enacted. You can see it goes back to 2002. It's California. Of course, everybody knows California tends to be a little more progressive, but we are moving this work and people are hungry for this work. Particularly, people are more interested in this work since the whole Texas redistricting debacle that we saw, the racial gerrymandering. Next slide, please. There we go. Great. Great. And so here are some places where we are actively currently working to get these passed. Alabama is on here, Arizona, Florida, Maryland, Michigan, New Jersey. And let's just say we actually engaged an independent research firm to do a survey of folks to see what they think about this. And 78% of the voters said they would support a state voting rights act in their state. That was done just a couple of years ago, about a year and a half ago. And so we've got the policy team, we have staff members who specifically focus on this. We've got a bill pending in Maryland that we're trying to get across the finish line. I'm actually speaking to a group of Deltas on Thursday at the Deltas 8 Days in Annapolis, Maryland, about some of these bills. Next slide, please. And so I don't know if you guys know this, but we actually introduced one. Well, I would say the folks on the ground introduced one in Texas during this past legislative session. Now, of course, Texas legislature meets only every 2 years. So we're not working on this right now during this session. But we recognize that, listen, at LDF, our focus was Southern states because our founder, Thurgood Marshall, focused on Southern states, right? And that's where most Black people live. And so we recognize that I showed you a list of states where it already passed. Of course, those places are not necessarily in the South. That doesn't mean that we don't try here in the South. And I just want to pause here, point of personal privilege, and say that we have to start somewhere. Please don't think that Project 2025 was hatched overnight. They have been building and building and building that for years. And so starting somewhere will get you somewhere. And so we might not magically have a state voting rights in Texas during the next legislative session, but it was introduced in the last one. And so the momentum needs to build, and the word needs to get out how Texans can try to protect themselves. And so that gives you an idea. And since you guys are from the Harris County type of areas, you know firsthand some of the challenges that you all have had through some of these state provisions that tried to stop some of the things that were going on in Texas so that more people could vote, particularly during the COVID period. Next slide, please. And so these are some of the things that a state voting rights act could address. They could address some unfairly drawn districts. We know a little bit about that, right? They could address at-large local elections that really kind of shut out Black voters and other voters of color. Inequitable polling places. If you have a polling place that people can't get to, the conditions aren't right, then that's an issue. This is particularly true when it comes to people who have disabilities who are having problems. Even though people can come to their car to help, so they can vote, some of these places that folks visit on our team and others are totally lacking as far as the facility goes. I actually monitored a place where it was practically dark. Matter of fact, the people who were working there were using flashlights. You know what I'm saying? Language assistance issues, it could address that. Voter intimidation, we can talk about that a little later too. Misinformation about the voting process. There's a lot of disinformation, as I call it, out there, right? Not just online, but also, sometimes in person, as well as voter purges. We've seen people taken off of voting rolls, even though they're regular voters, their names get wiped out, maybe because their name sounds like somebody else. They're in some other database, and so people's names, and they go vote, and their name's not there, and then they can't vote. So these are the types of things that a state voting right act could help with. Next slide, please. All right, so the prohibition on voter suppression. This is really one of the key areas here. And I recognize I have 5 minutes. I have 5 minutes. I hear you loud and clear, folks. And so barriers to deny voting opportunities to voters of color. These are the kind of tactics that have to be identified and addressed when you're looking at a state voting rights act. All right. Voting dilution, right? I talked a little bit about the at-large system. The at-large system really historically has not been a way to get Black voters to be able to elect a candidate of their choice, right? And that's really the goal. Can the Black community elect a person of their choice, no matter what color that person is, but someone who has the same interests they do, right? And then, like I said, it could bring back Section 5 pre-clearance issues that we've lost based on the litigation on the federal level. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, well, this is next slide. Okay, great. Okay, also, like I said, language access, and also making sure that the judges that the judges know what the law is under the State Voting Rights Act, because they're the ones. This is not going to be brought, cases under the State Voting Rights Act aren't going to be brought under federal law. They are going to be brought under state law. Next slide. Absolutely, it could impact redistricting. Absolutely can impact redistricting, because of all the things I just mentioned, because you'd be protecting your voters. Next slide. And I know I've got to rush through here so we can open it up for Q&A. And so to learn more about state VRAs, just go to our website. We created actually a model bill because there are not enough of us who work at LDF to get the word out. And so we want people to be able to see what a model state voting rights bill could look like. Next slide, please. All right, so listen, we got to prepare for November. We're nonpartisan, but we still got to prepare for November to make sure every voter can vote. And what we've got to think about is what's going on right now around the country regarding ICE and the Department of Homeland Security. So if you don't have that on your mind and you want to help your community make sure everybody votes, these are the kind of things that you got to be thinking about. We have a team called Black Voters on the Rise. They help with election protection. They can talk to various communities. Just let us know, and we can see if we can talk to communities as long as it's in our target 7 southern states. Next slide, please. And so what's different right now is not only the situation with ICE, Homeland Security, which could potentially intimidate people from coming to vote. Also, the issue is we don't have Department of Justice anymore, folks. The Department of Justice's job used to be to help protect voting rights. That's gone. They weaponize things. Next slide, please. So please get involved. Be a poll worker, be a poll monitor, volunteer for election protection, tell your friends. And now that you know the truth, know what you need to tell your friends. A woman who works, I met a woman who works near where I live. She actually thought the SAVE Act had passed. And so she thought that already now she has to take her birth certificate to go vote. That is not true. It is not passed. It may have passed the House, it has not passed the Senate. So that's just an example of how we've got to get the truth out, because people like her might say, okay, well, I don't have birth certificate, so I'm not going to go vote. Thank you for having me. Any questions?
That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so very much. Again, legislation, litigation, and the legacy of our vote. We want to remind everyone that you have an opportunity to drop your question in the chat, but we're going to start with a few questions that we already have planned for our speaker. Apologies for not having the background this evening, but I wanted to make sure that I could join everyone and be respectful and be on camera. The first question I would like to ask, and as we encourage everyone that has a question to please drop it in the chat. If the legacy of our vote is under siege, what is the single most important action a citizen can take outside of the ballot box?
I would absolutely say we currently have elected officials, and those elected officials need to hear from us. Right now, even on all kinds of things, even let's say the annihilation of the Department of Education, even though there's some people who are in Congress who are civil rights minded, their job is to do oversight. And so they've got to do some oversight as it relates to some of these agencies at the federal level. Talk to your state level folks, even your local folks, to see what they can do, even proactively, perhaps, right? And so we shouldn't just sit back and just wait to vote. We've got people to hold, we need them to hold accountable. And so that would be my recommendation there.
Accountability, and do not just sit back. That's good advice. We have a question here in the chat. Documentary proof of citizenship may sound innocuous or not harmful. Can you explain why it is a barrier to equal access to voting, especially in minority communities?
Absolutely. So it is not the norm for everybody to have a passport, for instance, right? It is not the norm for people to just be able to open a drawer and pull out a birth certificate. And if you don't have those things, you've got to pay for them. Many people are calling this the new version of the poll tax, right? To get a passport might cost you $100. You got to take a picture, you got to take time off, you've got to go to get it certified. To get a birth certificate, you've got to go through some hoops. You've got to pay some money. You got to take some time off. And it is clear, the data is clear that the challenge of getting those documents are even greater when it comes to Black communities, other communities of color, people with disabilities. And so that impacts us directly, but also women who have been married and changed their name on their voter registration or the driver's license may not match their birth certificate. That's kind of like duh, common sense, right? And so, in this regard, we need to align with some of our allies with whom we have shared issues regarding the SAVE Act. That's why, like places like the Women's Law Center are big allies of us as we fight this situation.
We do have a question from the audience. What should we do if we get to the polls, and this is part of what you're talking about, and then we're told that we're not eligible to vote? But that person may have already checked and their registration is valid, but for some reason the crew at the poll is saying you're not eligible. What should they do at that point?
Say contact election protection. 1-800-OUR-VOTE. That is a hotline that's available year round. Organizations like mine, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, and other civil rights group help manage that hotline, and they can tell you specifically what's going on. Every state is different, right? But you could tell them, where you're having the problem, and they would address that. I think April said that she has been part of election protection, and we actually help recruit election protection workers as well. You can get trained.
And in addition to calling 1-800-OUR-VOTE, could you elaborate more? Sometimes we hear, at least here in Texas and maybe everywhere, that you should not leave the poll without at least asking for some type of provisional ballot.
Yes, absolutely. You can do a provisional ballot. That is not the first choice, though, because provisional ballots get counted kind of after the fact.
Okay.
And so call that number first to try to cast a regular ballot versus a provisional ballot.
Okay. All right.
If I could just add there how important that is. I have worked as a trained lawyer for that hotline, and I was actually had, for some reason, I was dedicated to the Dallas area, the Plano area during the last primaries. And I got a lot of questions from people who called. There was a very, I would say, aggressive poll worker at one of the polls. And in fact, I got two calls from about that same poll worker that weren't allowing people who were disabled to vote curbside. So, we had to stop the presses. And I do want to say that 866 will file litigation if need be. So they're a full service voter protection agency. And as Demetria mentioned, they are year round. So they work. I've answered questions. So 866 Our Vote is very, very helpful.
Great. And I may have said 800 out of habit. So you're correct, 866.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that correction. I think we have time for a couple of more questions. So one is, I'd like to know why SCOTUS called, is it Calais, the Calais case back for a
Calais
second time,
case.
if it was super rare?
Why did they ask for a second
Yeah.
argument?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a great question. They don't tell us. They said, come back, argue it again, and we want you to argue regarding, a certain question,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't have at the tip of my tongue right now. But clearly there was some concern. I believe the Dobbs case was also argued twice. So if you can see the pattern, it's these high level cases that are being asked to argue twice, or more than once, I should say.
Okay. Do we have time for another question? This LDF recently characterized the Save America Act as, quote, disguising voter suppression as election security, end quote. Beyond the rhetoric, what specific legislation missteps in this bill should the public be most concerned about?
Oh, just be concerned about the entire bill. The entire bill. I tell you, like I said, in addition to the documentary proof of citizenship provisions that it kind of picks up from the SAVE Act, it adds rules for states, particularly states as relates to their voter registration systems. And listen, folks, we all know that generally speaking, the states control this type of topics. And so it also, the Save America Act creates a nationwide voter photo ID requirement, right, for federal elections. It applies to in-person voting and absentee voting. So can you imagine having to submit a copy of your ID when you were doing an absentee ballot? It's really some nasty stuff.
Okay. A question from the audience. New registered voters have not received their voters registration, and it has been told there was no online data as to what precinct they should vote in. Do you know how this can be resolved?
And can you repeat that again?
Sure. Let me make sure I'm reading it correctly. New registered voters have not received their voters registration, and it has been told there was no online data as to what precinct they should vote in. Do you know how, or has
I
this
would,
been resolved?
I would start with your county election official. I would start there. Their phone number should be online if you go to your
Mhm.
county election office. The election administrator should be able to know that information.
Okay.
If you still have a problem, then again, 866 Our Vote is a year-round hotline, year-round.
Okay. I am looking through. I know we have some additional questions. Um, how can we ensure that the legacy of the vote isn't erased in schools where anti-truth measures and book bans are currently targeting the very history of the civil rights movement?
We need to all, it's all hands on deck. We need to all make sure that we have, that we inform folks about what the history is, not just Black students, but all students about what the history is. And that can take different forms. Some people have youth group programs over the weekend, summer programs. And people, listen, we can't just think about federal elections. Who is on your school board, right? Let's run for office, right? The school board helps to determine what is taught. Now, when this attack came out from the federal government against schools teaching history, let me tell you, there were some states who stood up. I mean, I should say there were some school districts who stood up and said no, right? And that's because they had strong members of that school board. Or go talk to, if you can't run yourself, go talk to the school board and make a showing at the school board to get your word, get the word out to them. There were freedom schools back in the day too, where people taught students outside of the school hours.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so I know you, what are we going to do if Trump really, if the president of the United States really tries to, delay the elections?
There are a lot of people thinking about this. We're just one organization in the civil rights movement. We have allies and partners, like the Urban League, NAACP, Lawyers Committee. All of us are circling up and really trying to address this. But I tell you what, I can't speak for Texas per se, but
Mm-hmm.
some folks really need to talk to their attorney generals. They need to talk to their state elected officials and prepare. We can see some things that people are doing regarding this federal encroachment of ICE and DHH agents, period, right? Like I said
Mm-hmm.
earlier, that might be the attack that's going to happen in November. And so, what are our communities doing in preparation, not just for November, but for when this federal encroachment takes place? We've seen mayors like the mayor in Chicago is taking
Mm-hmm.
some steps and other people. So now is the time to be thinking about what is your community doing at the local level, right? As well as at the state level to deal with this encroachment issue.
Okay. And the last question, if we don't have time for more, but what should we tell folks, some who are on this call and may have answered the survey saying that they don't think their vote matters, that it doesn't make a difference? How can we
Well, I tell
encourage
you,
them?
yeah, well, I tell you, you just need to look at some places where differences have been made by just a few votes, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are even places where she was your candidate or not, that Kamala Harris lost by just a few votes. So you never know how many votes it takes to get the person over the hump, whether that be at the local level, state level, federal level. I always tell people water is political. People say, oh, I don't like politics. The water you drink is political. That comes from a particular district, right, of elected folks who make decisions about how much your water costs, where the water comes from. Water equity is actually something that we at LDF work on. We have working on very specifically in Georgia right now. We saw what happened in Michigan regarding water, right? Everything in our lives relate to these elections. Who is that state judge? Who is the JP making decisions about your life? That all comes from voting.
Well, I want to thank you for a very informative presentation and question and answer session focusing on legislation, litigation, and the legacy of our vote. Now I want to turn it over to Makia Thomas for the acknowledgments and the calls to action.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you again, Demetria, just for that comprehensive just overview and just understanding around the intersection between legislation and litigation, and just that it really provides us a roadmap for us as we head into these March primaries. Again, we kicked off early voting today here in Texas, and so are just really appreciate just the wealth of knowledge you bestowed on us today. Again, you've given us this why behind the work, and now it's time for the how. And so to everyone watching, we're transitioning into our calls to action. And this is where the conversation turns into contribution. We're asking that you take this momentum from today and carry it straight to the ballot box in 2026. First up, we have Pam Gaskin from the Houston Voting Initiative. Pam is the co-founder of the Houston Voting Initiative and a longtime civic engagement activist. All right, Pam, take it from here.
Good evening, and thank you so much for having me. The Houston Voting Initiative was founded by, it was the idea and brainchild of Dr. Annie Johnson Benefield, who is a longtime activist. She and I served in the League of Women Voters together. We were on the board, and I subsequently served on the board of the Texas League of Women Voters. By the way, I would like to say to my LDF sisters, I had the pleasure, extreme pleasure, of meeting Thurgood Marshall in person in 1967 in Austin, Texas. It was the honor of my life. Anyway, so let me go forward and say, what is our purpose? Our purpose is to empower, educate, and inform members of underserved and minority communities on their right to vote, how to vote, and all things related to voting. I've been asked to give you a call to action. I'm going to quote Annie. Annie is fond of saying that democracy is not a spectator sport. Democracy is a gladiator event. You must get in the ring and fight, because your very life, the lives of your community, and the lives of the people who come after you are depending on that. We have in the United States a representative democracy. What this means is that when you vote, you select your representatives. What we have going on now is just the opposite. People are trying to select their voters. That's what all this SAVE Act and voter ID and all of that is about. And I would like to, as just a point of education, tell you all, when you go to the polls, if they tell you you are not on the polls, understand this: in Texas this year, in the primaries, we no longer have what's called joint primaries, where when you go to the polling place, you were generally used to them saying, do you want to vote in the Democratic primary or the Republican primary? And they give you the appropriate ballot. Well, the Republican Party decided they didn't want to do joint primaries. So you may go to the same location, but you're going to have on one side Republicans and on the other side Democrats. And the machines are going to be different. You're going to have Republican machines and Democratic machines. Now, what this means is if you go to a location like Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church, for example, in the heart of Third Ward, you're probably going to get more Democratic voters at that polling place than Republican voters. So people, what's going to happen is you're going to have lines. You may have lines to vote. So just prepare yourself, especially on election day. And I just beg and plead for everyone, vote early. If you're going to have a problem at the poll, have it during early voting so that you can walk out of there and not ask for a ballot, a provisional ballot, because I have worked the ballot boards. Ballot board does not count provisional ballots until whatever caused it to be provisional is cured. So my call to you is to be vigilant, be active, find 10 people. You all get together. We have a long ballot. Get together and decide how you want to vote and get after it. And if you got more than 10 people, afterwards, all go out to eat or go do something. Make it celebratory, because this voting is our way of saying how we want our country, our city, our county to be run. So my call to action is to get out there, take some people with you, study, inform yourself, attend these types of events, and go vote.
Thank you
That's it.
so oh, thank you so much, Pam. We appreciate those words of just getting out there and getting to the polls and getting ourselves educated. Next up, we have Mary Benton from the Links Incorporated, who's going to give their call to action. Take it away, Mary.
Okay, thank you so much. Link Up the Vote is a national initiative of the Links Incorporated, and the message is clear: our voice, our vote, our power. We must get people in our communities to the polls because every vote counts. The Links call to action is about impacting communities of color. We encourage mobilization of voters and honor those forging a path for justice, positive change, and empowerment. By leading voter registration, education, mobilization, and information dissemination, we fulfill our civic duty and empower others to make smart decisions and make their voices heard at the ballot box in every election. We need everyone to have the ability to participate in the democratic process and to be able to register and vote. The Links Incorporated is committed to this call to action in ensuring every American has the ability to exercise their constitutional right to vote. I'm going to close with the words of Jesse Jackson in honor of his life and legacy. He was not a link. Perhaps maybe he was a connecting link. I know he knew some links. And from his famous speech, I think it aligns with the Link's call to action. You must not surrender. You may or may not get there, but just know that you are qualified and you hold on and hold out. We must never surrender. America will get better and better. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. Tomorrow night and beyond, keep hope alive. Go vote and take people with you. Remember, link up the vote because it is about our voice, our vote, our power.
Thank you so much for those words, and just appreciate you lifting up Jesse Jackson today, just to honor him and just like all the work that he's done for us and this work. I'm going to close out with the Baja or Bay Area Houston Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, our call to action. And so first, I would like to just name Find Your Why. Before heading to the polls, find your why. Don't just vote because it's a habit, vote because it's strategy. Do the research. What is the agenda that the candidates have that are on the ballot? What are their policies? How are they directly going to impact you in your day-to-day life in your community? And when you understand these stakes, your vote becomes your voice. Your second step is to build your voting plan. Again, ensuring I saw some questions around voter registration status. Those certifications are coming out, so make sure you're checking your mail to ensure you have all the proof that you need when you go to the polls. Again, master your schedule. Knowing your early voting windows, again, ours just launched, making sure you know where to find your polling location. So in Harris and Galveston County, you have Harris Votes and Galveston Votes web pages. Also in Brazoria and Fort Bend, thinking about going to your county clerk's page to find those locations as well and additional information. Choose your day. Decide, are you an early voter, which we're encouraging you to get out to early vote, or a day of voter? Set your calendar alert today. Vet the candidates. Use Ballotpedia. It's a really great resource that gives you a lot of information and less fluff. And lastly, multiply your impact. Ensure you're not going this alone. Ensure your friends, family know about your voting plan. Share, have conversations about it on social media, at the kitchen table, in the group chats. So just ensure that you're letting everybody know what's going on at this time for the March primaries. And with that, I'll close. I'm going to hand it over to April to close us out.
All right. Well, there you have it, folks. I mean, you just heard from Makia, which, by the way, is the co-chair of the Social Action Committee for Bay Area Houston alumni. Thank you, Makia. And you also heard from Mary Benton, who embodied Reverend Jesse Jackson. And Mary is the co-chair of the National Trends and Services Committee at the Gulf Coast Apollo Texas chapter, the link. So thank you very much for those calls of action, as well as Pam. We worked together before, so it's nice to see you again this evening, Pam, giving the call of action for the Houston Voting Initiative. Again, we hope you truly enjoyed this evening. And more importantly, that you leave here empowered, equipped with tools, insight, and a deeper understanding of how legislation and litigation shape our legacy to vote. Folks, our vote is powerful. Our vote is personal, and our vote is generational. I did a quick peruse of our attendees this evening. First of all, shout out to 18JOE, my line sisters who attended tonight. So we've got all generations. We've got my line sisters. We've got very influential members of Delta Sigma Theta who are seasoned, very influential members and community leaders of the Links Incorporated who are seasoned. We also have some younger participants on here, which I'm also very glad to see. So thank you all. We hit all generations. We appreciate you. Before we close, let's shine our light on the hidden figures. I do want to give a very big shout out to our incredible tech team, working diligently behind the scenes to keep everything running smoothly and seamlessly tonight. We see you, tech team. We thank you and we appreciate you, and we won't get on your nerves anymore this evening. So go ahead and send them some high fives and hearts. I'm sorry. So everyone, we want you to please stay connected and please stay engaged. Follow the Bay Area Houston alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and the Gulf Coast Apollo chapter of the Links Incorporated and the Houston Voting Initiative on their social media platforms to remain engaged, informed, and again, activated. Because remember, what we do today becomes our legacy tomorrow. Thank you all and have a good evening.